I'm Heba Elias.
And I'm Siobhan Drew.
And welcome to Momentum, a Race Forward podcast, where we explore how racial justice work
is showing up everywhere around us. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Momentum, a Race Forward podcast. As I mentioned last episode, Heba is away. She is my co-host, and I'm here holding down the fort with a new interview. Today, we're talking with Julissa Arce about the complexities of undocumented life and assimilation in the U.S. So you don't want to miss this. And if you want to go deeper on the topic of immigration after the episode, I encourage you to check out Race Forward's newest podcast series. It's called Reflections, and it's actually co-executive produced by Hendeleva, who, as you know, brought you Momentum, the podcast you're listening to. So please do check that out on Apple Podcasts. Let's get to the interview. Julissa Arce is a nationally recognized author, speaker, and social justice advocate who, with America Ferrara, is currently developing and executive producing a television series for a major network, optioned from her best-selling memoir, My Underground American Dream. Her young adult memoir, Someone Like Me, is used in classrooms across the country, and her forthcoming book, You Sound Like a White Girl, The Case for Rejecting Assimilation, is where Julissa dives into and tears apart the lie that assimilation leads to belonging. She was named one of People en Español's 25 most powerful women of 2017 and 2019's Woman of the Year by the City of Los Angeles. In order to help other young people in similar circumstances, Julissa co-founded the Ascend Educational Fund, which is a college scholarship and mentorship program for immigrant students in New York City, regardless of their ethnicity or national origin or immigration status. She was officially sworn in as an American citizen in August of 2014, and she's a leading voice in the fight for social justice, immigrant rights, and education equality. Welcome, Julissa Arce.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Can you tell us, how did this journey start for you?
Yeah, it's so interesting because I had a whole nother career before I became a writer. I worked on Wall Street for 10 years, which is like a very different world than the one that I occupy now. And I guess I didn't have like this long-term plan. It wasn't like I thought, oh, I'm going to become an activist and I'm going to become an author and I'm going to produce TV and film shows. Like it sort of just built on each other, these things. What I did know was that after I left Wall Street, I knew that I wanted to share my story. And I wanted to share my story of having been undocumented part of the time that I worked on Wall Street. I wanted to share some of the struggles of being undocumented. And I knew that I wanted to share that story. I didn't know how or where. And I had met a reporter, a Bloomberg Businessweek reporter who did an article about bankers doing good. And so he had covered the Ascent Educational Fund, which you mentioned, my scholarship fund. And that's how I met him. And then a year later, because I started that scholarship while I was still on Wall Street. And a year later, when I left, I reached back out to him and I said, hey, I have a story to tell you. And we met over coffee. And I sort of told him the whole story. I worked at Goldman Sachs using fake papers and sort of just like the whole story. And then it sort of all started from there. He wrote this amazing article for Bloomberg Businessweek. And then after that, I thought there was a lot more of the story to tell. So then I wrote my first book. And from there, it kind of just took off. Then I wrote my second book and now I'm on my third.
Wow. I'm trying not to feel like I haven't accomplished enough. No, this is really.
That's part of what this next book is about. You Sound Like a White Girl, The Case for Rejected Assimilation, right? There's a whole chapter about the lie of success, because I think that in some ways my story is sometimes used in a way that I don't love, which is this like example of what success looks like. And it's like, yes, but let me tell you about all the sacrifices and all the things that happen behind the scenes.
So like going against the model minority thing?
The whole model minority thing and the whole sort of like hustle culture, like capitalist culture of like never rest, always go, go, go. And you know what? Like I take a lot of naps now. So it's, I definitely get my rest in. It's not this like, go, go, go 24/7.
I love it. Do you follow at the Nap Ministry on Twitter? I follow them. They
I do
encourage you.
not, but it sounds like I should.
Yep. Yep. Okay. So your first book, My Underground American Dream, it was a hit. It did really well. Can you talk about maybe why you think it was a hit? And also, did your life change after you published that first book?
So there's been a really big shift in my work because when I first wrote that book, My Underground American Dream, I did it with the intention of changing the narrative, of preaching beyond the choir, of changing hearts and minds. And what that means really is that I centered a different community in that writing, right? Because I was trying to reach them. I was trying to connect with them. I was trying to get them to see our shared humanity, right? But something really beautiful happened, which really opened my eyes to some of the faults of trying to do the work for other people, which is that the people who most resonated with my book were actually my own community of immigrants, my own community of Latinos, my own community of people of color who saw themselves reflected in that book, right? And I think that ultimately that's why the book did so well, because we could see ourselves in each other's story. We could see ourselves in the stories that I share in that book. And that ultimately is what opened my eyes to the fact that, I don't want to spend my time preaching beyond the choir. Like there's people who do that and I'm glad that they do, but I want to spend my time energizing the choir because I sort of feel like I lost a little bit of dignity along the way, trying to convince like racist white people that I am a human just like them. And I don't want to spend my time doing that anymore. And so, my second book, Someone Like Me, and definitely my newest book, You Sound Like a White Girl, are very much centered in my community. And, when I say we, I mean us. And it's been a big shift.
That's deep. And I feel like it's probably a decision that a lot of people are having to make now because, like you said, it's a choice.
Yeah. And you know what? It's like I hope that, my books are a welcoming space to everybody, and like if somebody who's not part of my community, who's not a person of color, who like, has lived a very different life than me, wants to like pick up my book, I do think they're going to see themselves in the book. And I do think they're going to learn something. And like, if you're ready to come into this space, like I welcome you, but I'm just not spending my time going out trying to bring you into this space.
I can respect that for sure. You Sound Like a White Girl, The Case for Rejecting Assimilation. That's a really provocative and profound title. And I wonder if you could define the type of assimilation you're talking about for our audience, and then tell us what the goal is, how you want this book to be received, or what your goal was in writing it.
Yeah. So the title of the book, You Sound Like a White Girl, the reason I named the book that is because when I was in high school, this guy I had a crush on, told me I sounded like a white girl. And he didn't mean it as a compliment, but I took it as a compliment because I had spent so long trying to get rid of my Spanish accent. I had spent so long trying to assimilate that in that moment when he said that to me, I was like, oh my God, I sound like a white girl. Like it was like an exciting time for me. And looking back on it, I just want to like give little Julissa a hug and tell her like, this is actually a very racist idea that's trying to tame you and make you small and make you fit into this mold that you're never actually going to fit into. It's just like a never reachable line. And when I talk about assimilation, I think that we just have to be very honest that when we ask immigrants to assimilate, what we're asking them is to assimilate to whatever it means to be white, like to white culture, to whiteness. We're not asking immigrants to assimilate to the American culture because, you know what, like I am American and you're American, and like our cultures are not necessarily what's always considered like mainstream American culture. So when we ask immigrants to assimilate, is to assimilate into whiteness. And that's the idea that I'm rejecting, that we should not assimilate because ultimately it doesn't lead to belonging. I have found belonging in the spaces we've created for ourselves.
When you talk about assimilation as this kind of violent way of denying ourselves and denying our own culture to try to be a part of whiteness, this is not one of my questions I prepared, but I do wonder, what has this pandemic been like for you? And has it been a time for you of reconnecting in other ways to yourself, to your own culture, just like privately? Because I've been reading that it's been that for a lot of people. So I just want to go on a tiny tangent.
Yeah, well, you know, what's interesting is that I started in earnest writing the manuscript for this book in March 2020. So I actually spent a vast majority of lockdown, because I think we're still in the pandemic, but of the lockdown period of the pandemic, writing and researching and filling in the gaps of things that I already knew and things that I wanted to know more about. So I spend, you know, a significant amount of time both writing and reading. And many of the books that I read were books written by Latino, Latina, Latinx historians that told me a different story of the United States, one in which I could actually see myself, one which was actually a more truthful story of this country. And absolutely, that helped to connect me to my roots and to understand that while I was not born in this country, my people, my ancestors were in this land long before it was even called the United States of America. And that we have been here every single monumental moment of this country, whether it was in the fight for independence, whether it was, you know, during the Civil War, whether it was during the Civil Rights Movement, every single moment. We, and when I say we, I mean specifically like Mexican Americans and Latinos more broadly, like we have been here and we just never learned that history, and nobody else ever learns that history. So it's easy to say, to point to our community and say that we're like new to this country, and we're not.
Yes. Growing up, I actually found it bizarre that people talked about Mexican people specifically and broader Latino groups as immigrants, because I'm like, I can see the map and this is a landmass and they're indigenous to it. And that's me as a child. I just learned that it wasn't acceptable to say that. Do you know what I mean? To challenge it. But I'm like, they're from here. What do you mean? So you drew the line a little lower. So what does that mean? They're from here. You're not from here. Like, so I'm glad you said that. And I'm glad that you did get to dig into all of that during this very tough time. You were featured in Race Forward's Drop the I Word campaign, which was a campaign that sought to end the use of the word illegal when referring to human beings. Do you think that a lot has changed since that campaign in 2010?
You know what I think that, and again, you know, kind of goes back to what I was saying about like focusing on changing the narrative of how other people see us versus changing the narrative of how we see ourselves. And to me, the most impactful part of that campaign was the fact that we in the undocumented community have been empowered by the campaign of Drop the I Word, right? Because I feel like when I was growing up and when I was undocumented, the word undocumented didn't exist. Like it had not come into our lexicon. So I used to refer to myself as illegal, right? And when you think of yourself as illegal, it does something to your confidence. It does something to your ability to even feel human, right? Because all of a sudden you're this thing that's wrong, right? Because what does illegal tell you? Illegal tells you that something is not right, right? That there's something wrong with it. And so you start thinking of yourself as there's something wrong with me. I shouldn't be here. Right? And so to me, the most amazing part of the campaign is the fact that like undocumented people are like, we are human and we're not illegal and we're not going to let you call us illegal. And we're going to start using this other words to describe our immigration status, because these words shouldn't describe us as human. It should just describe what our immigration status is. And, you know, we're going to not view ourselves as this illegal word, and we're going to find joy, and we know that like papers don't define everything about us.
Yes. I'm sorry. I'm like giving snaps in my brain and I'm like, wait, no, you're interviewing. 1 year into the Biden administration, I wonder what you think about where his administration has stood on immigration so far, and if there's anything more you think can be done to address the urgency of this moment.
I mean, listen, like not just the Biden administration, but Democratic administrations in the past have all like fallen super short of the promises that they make, specifically as it relates to the immigrant community, right? So the Biden administration has a very mixed record, right? On one hand, they got rid of the public charge rule. And for people who are not familiar, that was like literally a ruling that made being poor like illegal. Like all of a sudden, if you didn't meet certain thresholds, like your US citizen children couldn't have access to things like food safety programs, to healthcare. I mean, we're talking about US citizen children, right? And so, and then you wouldn't be able to get a green card if you didn't meet certain income qualifications. So the Biden administration got rid of that rule, and it's a very important thing that they got rid of. But at the same time, they are upholding, and they're in court upholding what's called Title 42, which is the sort of the code in the law that the Trump administration was using to separate families at the border. And there was such huge outcry about that when it was happening under a Trump administration. And more than being upset with the Biden administration, because we know politicians are going to be politicians, I am concerned with us, the public, who don't seem to have the same kind of energy as we did when this was happening under Trump.
I think that the media plays a role in that as well, in terms of the way things are framed under different administrations and the way systemic issues, like you're saying, that you think the United States government has work to do on how they treat immigration policies from some years ago, though, not just right now. But I'm not sure if that's how it's always framed in the press, for people to understand that this is a long-term fight and not just a admin by admin fight. So thank you for clarifying that. Many people in the U.S., in fact, believe that there is an immigration entry line, that undocumented people should just get on that line and wait their turn. So I just wonder, what do you want our audiences to know about the reality of U.S. immigration policies? Is there anything you would share?
Yeah. So in the book, you sound like a white girl. There's a chapter that's called The Lie of Legality, right? Where I go deeply to dismantle this idea that there is some sort of line and some sort of quote unquote right way for immigrants to come into this country. The very first thing that I want people to know is that immigration policy has been driven first and foremost by race, and specifically by excluding non-white people from becoming citizens and from entering into this country. Okay. So that's the very first thing. And in the book, I gave a lot of historical examples of how this is true. Number two is that you said it, this line that we often talk about, that we tell people, get in the back of the line, wait your turn, is a myth. There is no line. Creating a line is actually what immigration reform would do. Immigration reform would create a line, and it would create a pathway for people to apply, to pay fines, to go through background checks, to quote unquote wait their turn. That's what immigration reform would do. Because we haven't had immigration reform in the US for more than 30 years now, that line doesn't exist. And so people have very, very few ways to actually fix their immigration status. I was very fortunate because, one, I came into the country with a visa. So I didn't have what's called an illegal entry, right? I didn't cross the border. I mean, I did, but I did it legally because I came on a plane and I had a visa. But that to me is just circumstantial. Like, I was 11. I didn't choose to come that way. And if my mom had, told me we're going to get smuggled into the United States, like, that's how I would have come here. Right. So to me, it's sort of like, why am I deserving and someone else is not? It doesn't make any sense. So, and secondly, like I married a US citizen. And so I was able to fix my immigration status. And also because I came in legally. Like there's people who have married US citizens, who have US citizen children, who still cannot change their immigration status because they crossed the border and didn't have a visa to enter the country in the first place. And so there's all these like nuances to the immigration system that make it impossible for people to do it the right way. So it's like at the same time that we're urging people to do that, we have all but obliterated like every possible way that people can actually do that.
You just made the case for immigration reform, sounds like, on our podcast. Thank you. Your work has always seemed to want to push the conversation about immigration forward, and you've recently done that in some of your racial justice projects. And I just wondered if you can tell us before you go about some of those projects, any ones that you would want the audience to know about.
Yeah, so I did this really incredible project last year with Unidos US, where we did a series of short videos talking about racial justice, specifically through a Latino lens. And we touched on a lot of like history that is not known and how that history is still showing up today, from like when Mexican American kids were segregated in schools to the ways in which Latinos were affected by things like redlining and how those things are still showing up today. And so people can check that out on my Instagram. We also did a series of conversations called La Historia Uncovered. Season 2 was with Unidos. They're really, really incredible conversations. There's 4 of them, so check them out. And then, of course, I'd love for people to pick up a copy of You Sound Like a White Girl, The Case for Rejecting Assimilation.
Excellent. Tell the audience, where can they find you on social media?
So I am at Julissa Arce on Instagram and Twitter, which is mostly where I'm active. Yeah, that's where they can find me.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm really glad that you were able to do it and that you got a chance to rest. And yes, it has been a pleasure. I've learned a lot, and I will be getting the audiobook. Is there an audiobook I can grab, or do I need to?
I recorded it. I recorded the audiobook. So yes, thank you so much for having me. This was great.
Thank you, Julissa Arce, for that interview. We appreciate you so much. And I want to mention to everyone listening that Facing Race registration is open. We will have Facing Race on site in Phoenix, Arizona. And also there will be an online component for everyone who wants to participate remotely. So please visit facingrace.raceforward.org to get involved in the largest multiracial, intergenerational gathering for organizers, educators, creatives, and other leaders in the racial justice movement. We are so excited to be able to have people be online with us as well as in person. There are early bird and group tickets available as well. So please learn more, figure out how you want to participate, and get your tickets at facingrace.raceforward.org. All right, dear listeners, we'll be taking a small break as this season of Momentum has come to a close. Thank you all so much for tuning in. And remember to rate and subscribe and catch up on past episodes with us via Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Pandora. We are so happy that you've joined us, and we wish you safety and love.